Alrighty, guys. So we have our game, right? Super interesting game. I'm gonna go ahead and hit play one more time. If you're going over from the previous video, you know exactly what's gonna happen. Oh no, you don't, because actually I messed with it a little bit. We're gonna go back over here and let's set this a bounciness back just to one. Um, so one big thing that we like, every game that you make is going to need this. It's going to need code, right? A game without any code really it has no player input. It has no nothing, right? Nothing can actually happen if we don't actually code it. Um, so what I want us to do is in our scripts folder. Remember, we do need this to be in our scripts folder. We do not want this to be just like out and about over here. We're going to right click, go to create, and in here, we're going to make a mono behavior script. And we're going to call this ball controller. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So what this, couple things real quick here. You do not want any spaces in your script names. This is big no-no. You just don't do it. It causes issues. You should probably get in the habit of doing this because file names in general shouldn't have spaces. It just leads to issues overall. Another thing you'll notice, let me see if I can make this anything bigger. There we go. Is I capitalized the B and I capitalized the C here. This is something at Bradley that we require, but generally companies will ask you to do this, and the it's just the general first letter of every word in the title of a script is going to be capitalized. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and open up the script just by double clicking on it. Slowly but surely, it's opening. Oh, it opened on my other screen. That's why I was a bit confused. All right. So right out the gate, we're going to notice that we have a lot of stuff here that we might not have ever seen before. I'm going to zoom in so that it's a little bit easier to see. Right out the gate, we see something called public, a class, ball controller, mono behavior, start, update. What are all these things? Unity engine, well, that's the tool we're using. This up here, we're going to break down like what every single piece of this is real quick. Because it's not really that complex. Another name for a script is a class, right? So that word we're just going to put to the side. It's just another name for what we just made, right? We know we named it ball controller. So makes sense that the file, like at the very top, it would be talking about ball controller. But what's this public thing, right? Public simply means that like anything that has this identifier can be used in other scripts or other parts of the game engine, right? So by this class being public, that means if we have a game manager or a paddle manager or a brick manager or something like that, or like some kind of other object, it can go ahead and get an access to ball controller. Okay, not just out in the ether, but it will know about that a ball controller script does exist in the project, right? Now we didn't start on line one, but that's because this is, in my opinion, the most important line for us to understand. Mono behavior, I'm going to come back to. I want to start actually up here. This using, right? What is that? Using's up at the top of our scripts. Usually, the Unity actually comes with more, but in Unity 6, they took a few out. The using is basically like different libraries that our script can get access to. Let's go ahead and delete this real quick. Or actually, you don't delete it. I'm going to delete it. And we'll notice mono behavior disappears and these turn tinted gray. Well, that's because mono behavior, the only reason we can use this keyword here is because we are using Unity Engine. So using Unity Engine gives us access to this mono behavior word. Now, what is that? What mono behavior does is it allows us to put scripts on our game objects. Okay, so it's like what makes it a component that is able to be added. And in fact, what it does is the way it does this is through something called inheritance. Just like how you might get your hair color or your eye color from your parents, mono behavior is getting its component. It's taking a second. Give it just a minute. From behavior, which is getting its component from component. So a behavior is a component. A mono behavior is a behavior our ball controller is a mono behavior. So therefore, if we go up the chain, it's a component. And we said in the last video that we can add components to game objects. So that's what we call in computer science and in game development inheritance. Now, you can make your own um, inheritance structures, right? We can make something that inherits from ball controller, and we can make something that inherits from that next thing, and next thing, and next thing. And it will get traits from all of the previous things it inherited from, just like how maybe you have your grandpa's nose or something like that, right? You know, that it's something that is just passed down through all the different classes and all the different scripts in your program. Now, for your first couple projects, you probably don't need to inherit from anything you make, but all your scripts will come by default inheriting from mono behavior. Now, we have the start and update, and they have words over them. They have actual sentences, and we call these comments, right? It's just like a little explanation of what this thing is underneath. And if we look at start, it says, start is called once before the first execution of update after the mono behavior is created. So as soon as a script is created in the scene, start is going to happen. And an update is called once per frame. If you don't understand what once per frame means, think of it as frame rate. How many times does the screen refresh, or how many times does the app refresh, I should say, every second, right? So that means update is going to happen a whole lot. And that's pretty much it for scripts. There's a whole lot more with it, right? But that's like the nuts and bolts of a default Unity script. Start is going to happen immediately. Update is going to happen every frame. This is what you named your class. It becomes a component because of this guy. And using Unity Engine, let's say, I actually want to add one more thing to the usings. If I wanted to be working in the user interface, so the UI, I would have to say using unityengine.ui. And that gives me access to all the different UI elements that we could be using, right? And these are just like different parts of Unity that the script doesn't have access to all of them right away, because that would be a very bloated script, right? It would have to load a whole bunch. So it kind of is like checking out a library book, right? And adding all of its contents to this. Speaking of books, this is the thing that gets people confused the most a lot of the time. These little brackets, right? Basically, I want you to think of these brackets as the starting and ending of a chapter or of a book. For our class, this is the ball controller book, and this is the front cover. This little bracket, right? That means everything between it, and if I click on it, it should highlight its partner down here. The back cover of the book is part of the ball controller class, right? Or the ball controller book. It's if this is the front cover, this is the back cover. You could think of these, the void start, as the chapters, and the void update, these little brackets, as chapters. And you'll have things where, let me do this. You might end up with lots of brackets in here. You might write some big long function that has a whole bunch of brackets. And you can think of these as a chapter, a page, a paragraph, a sentence. However it works in your head, you can have these going on and on and on and on. But the trick is, if I were to delete update, or delete the closing of the update chapter, I'm doing my little finger quotes because it's not really a chapter, but it's a way to think about it. I start getting an error, okay? And it says a closed bracket is expected. And technically, I can put it here, and sometimes it'll auto realign it for you, which is really, really helpful. But basically, if you're ever getting errors saying like, oh, there should be a parentheses, start following your open and your close. Your open and your close. And you'll quickly be able to find which one is missing. Now, we just talked about code a whole lot, but we didn't actually do anything, which is always annoying to me. So, in start, I want us to write something. I want us to write debug.log, open parentheses, put some quotes in, and this is something every programming class kind of starts with. Hello world. And I just realized my fan's on, so I'm sorry if there's been a humming throughout this entire video. Go ahead and turn that off for a second. It's a little warm in my office. I'm going to go ahead and save it. You should save with Control S. So actually, if you see this little yellow block here, That's generally a sign that things aren't saved. Now, you notice I have an error. I undid it. I'm glad I did. The equivalent, we're going back to this book example with chapters and books and paragraphs and sentences. This line right here is the equivalent of a sentence. It is a command. It is just a single line of code that's going to print out the words hello world. But just like in grammar, just like when you write, you have to end your sentence. And in code, we end it with a semicolon. Or at least in C#. And that's the programming language we're using. Some programming languages don't use a semicolon. They'll use something else, or they just won't have anything. But in C#, we do have to use a semicolon here. Now, if we were to go and hit play right now, nothing would happen. Because the script, though it's in our assets folder, just like how the brick is in our assets folder, it's not doing anything yet, right? So I'm going to go to my ball, because we wrote the ball controller script, and I'm going to drag it onto it in this, you can still see it, down here, right there, right in the seam. Now, that's sometimes really hard for people to get, right? You can also drag it underneath. I'm going to remove both of these, or you can simply add component and add ball controller. And I know my face is in the way, but there's that big add component button right there. So let's go ahead and add ball controller. Now, if I hit play, my little message button was turned off. We'll see hello world printed in our console once. And that happened as soon as the game starts. So I'm going to go ahead, turn it off, clear, run it one more time. And it prints right away. I want us to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this line and put it in update and say, hello world in update. Just so we can see it. Now, don't forget to save your script. Now, if you do that during play mode, your code will save, but it will not run. And now you can see that it's printing out every frame. Okay? If you want to get a look at what your frame rate currently is, you can expand your game window to see the stats button. And my frame rate is about 140 something, between 130 and 150. That means I'm getting that many printouts a second, and it's just going to keep going and going and going and going. Now, this isn't very exciting. Okay. I'm going to delete these debug logs, and let's do something a little bit different. I want you to take a second, pause the video if you need to think about it. What on our ball controls the physics? There's a component that does that. Go ahead and over here. And we can just look through them. We have, and if you're like component, what is that? Well, let's look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components on our ball. A transform, a sprite renderer, rigid body, circle collider, ball controller. No, it's not the transform. I know it's not the sprite renderer. Rigid body has gravity on it, and I don't think you need to have even taken a physics class in order to know gravity has to do with physics. Right? So, all of these components we can get a hold of in our code. So what I want to do is I want to set our ball in a direction, right? So I'm going to go back to my code. And this is kind of one of the things that you can look up. How do I get a component in my code? And then throw Unity at the end. And you'll quickly find that there is a get component function. And Unity a lot of the time will try and autocomplete for you. These little triangle brackets are saying, what kind of component do you want to get? Well, we know we want rigid body 2D. That's the one that has to do with all of our physics, right? And if we're going to tell it to go in a direction, and it's using physics, we're going to want to do that with like setting its speed or its velocity. So let's search. Is there anything called... Oh, I forgot something. We need parentheses at the end, because that kind of like gives us access to everything in the rigid body. If I do a dot and I can search for speed, not there. Let's think a little bit more physics-like, right? If I search for velocity, I have angular velocity and linear velocity. And linear velocity X, these are new with Unity 6, these two. That's actually really, really cool. And you can get, and said, that's very, very cool. So you're seeing me in real time learning some new things too. Linear velocity is what we want. And in a lot of tutorials these days, because it used to just be called velocity, linear velocity is the new term that they're using. So I'm going to say it's equal to 5. But I'm getting an error. A little bit confusing, right? Why am I getting an error? Let's hover over it and read the error. Cannot implicitly convert type int to Unity Engine Vector 2. Now in class, we should have talked about all kinds of different variable types, right? There's integers, there's floats, there's vector 2s, there's all these different things. An integer is just like in our math class, right? It's a whole number. A float is a decimal number. A vector 2 is a little bit more complicated. If we think about a 2D game, if I'm going diagonal, I couldn't just say that I'm going to the right, I'm going to the up. I have two components to it. I'm going right and up. And that is what a vector 2 is. It's two parts to one value. So I'm going to go ahead and say new vector 2. And I'm going to give it 10 and 10. This is setting, if we hover over velocity, you know, I put an int in there. I knew that was silly. If I hover over velocity, we see that it is of type vector 2, which these things will come natural to you over time once you start thinking about them like this. But with this being written, we should be able to go back and save it, hit play. You should see something else happening now. It fired off, and it looks pretty good. That's not how a breakout game's supposed to work. Let's make some changes. This is where like the programmer needs to shut up and the game designer kind of comes in and says, that's not fun. So what happens if we make our gravity scale 0? That's over in our rigid body. We could set the gravity scale to 0 because what was happening there is it went off to the top right, hit the wall, and then gravity helped it go down faster, right? So if we take our gravity scale and say, yo, no gravity on the sky. Very interesting, but we still have some stuff going on. It's really slowing down a bit, huh? Look in the scene view, see what we got cooking over here. This is where that physics brain has to come in a little bit. It's losing some momentum as it spins. Now, I hate rotations personally. Well, Unity gives us a little bit of a good helpful tool with the rigid body. I want us to constrain its rotation in Z. And this is really important, something for us to get a hold of early. This green arrow is our up and down. That's Y. The red arrow is our X. That's left and right. Z is forward and back, right? It's something that like in different tools such as like Blender and I think Maya, I could be wrong. It's not always like that, right? Y might be left or right, and X might be up and down, or Z or something like that, right? But in Unity, Y is up and down, X is left and right, Z is forward and back. And if we go ahead and hit that 2D button again, we can see the Z angle, or the Z direction. And in a 2D game, let me grab something real quick. Use my phone. If this is my screen, you can tell that I'm rotating around the Z-axis because this is the way that the object rotates, right? It's rotating around this. If it was rotating around the X, it would be rotating back and forth. If it was rotating around the Y, it would be rotating like this. But in a 2D game, it's usually rotating like that. So I'm going to freeze the rotation in the Z. And you can see that they didn't even bother on a rigid body 2D to say, let's freeze the rotation on the others, because you very rarely want to rotate like that in a 2D game. Go ahead and hit play and let's see what happens now that we've modified this behavior just a little bit. Okay, all right. Still losing its momentum just a tad. had to pause it to be able to remember what the heck was going on because we were still losing that momentum. I want us to go back over to our physics material. You can see my ball is bouncing and it's just fine. It's going around. It's not losing any energy. You want to set your friction to 0. Friction allows the ball to lose momentum as it's bouncing around, colliding with things, and we simply don't want that, right? We want a perfectly frictionless surface so that way then it just glides across the screen easily. Now, we've done a lot here, right? We've went and added some code. We printed our first message, hello world. We got our ball going. We said, ooh, it sucks, so let's take the gravity off. Ooh, that's not working, so let's let Zach pause the video and go figure out that he needed to take the friction off. And we added the bouncy material. We made our sprites. We did all these different things. That's what game development is, right? It's going through problem solving, thinking about, well, what could be happening here? What could be the next thing? And you're not always going to have all the answers. Let me look over here. Let me grab a page real quick. I want you to Google the Unity documentation, right? This is your gateway to learning everything there is to know about Unity. If I go over to scripting API, every single piece of like the code is in here. You know how we inherited Unity Engine? We did using Unity Engine. Well, here it is. Everything in Unity Engine for you to go and learn and see what all these different things are, right? So let's say I really didn't understand rigid bodies, right? If I go up to the top and I search up rigid body 2D, my very first result has all the things with an explanation of what is going on here, right? What are all these different objects? What are all these different functions that I can run? This plus YouTube, plus talking to your teachers, plus talking to TAs, plus talking to other people who are just working in the engine are the best way to learn about game development, about coding, about all the stuff. So I highly, highly encourage you to research, and ask questions. But that's it for now. What we're going to do in the next video is go and start getting our player input going, because Unity has made huge changes in the past few years on how input works, and it's so much easier than it used to be. So thanks for watching, and see you later.